Hello, everyone. Welcome to Top of the Hop. Welcome to our talk tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Samantha Lazar. I'm the curator of academic programming at the Hopkins Center, and it's been my honor to arrange this discussion and many events with the team here this week. And I also want to say that I've been looking forward to this night and having this production here for 6 years. Since the team was first here in residence for a week at Dartmouth in 2020, right before the pandemic. They came here to work on developing this piece. And I can't believe that they're finally here presenting it. Yay! All right, so you probably know tonight our panelists are going to talk about the origins of the play, the ways it connects with Dartmouth, and the legacy of slavery in our region. And I'm just going to give some very short introductions. I've really shortened their bios here because we have a whole bunch of them. So let's see. The team company members first. On the end here, we have Rachel Chavkin. She's founding artistic director of the Brooklyn-based ensemble, The Team, and she's also a writer and dramaturg and co-director of Reconstructing. Additionally, she received the 2019 Tony Award, Drama Desk Award, and Outer Critics Circle Award for Best Director of a Musical for Hadestown. You may have heard of that. And next to her, we have Jillian Walker, a writer, performer, and co-composer for Reconstructing. She creates sacred texts that break the brutal boundaries of the colonial imagination. Her work has taken the form of plays, musicals, sacred lecture, sermon, concert gatherings, and prayer performances for remembrance and liberation. And then our Dartmouth scholars. To my right is Dr. Deborah King, an associate professor of sociology emeritus with expertise in sociology of law, prisons, African American women, race, class, and gender, deviance and social control, and sociology of culture. She's the co-director of the Dartmouth and Slavery Project and was one of the folks that members of the team, including both Rachel and Jillian, met with when they were here in residence. And then we have Dr. Nicole Maskiell, an associate professor of African and African American studies. She specializes in the colonial history of the Northeast with a focus on early Black Americans in the region. She teaches courses that explore themes of race, family, memory, and silence. And our moderator in the middle, Dr. Shayante Allen, is an assistant professor of sociology whose research draws on race, social movements, and intersectionality literatures to examine how Black resistance to racial inequality varies across social institutions. She theorizes contemporary strategies for navigating racial and gendered hierarchies. Welcome, everyone. Dr. Shea.
All right, thank you so much for those lovely introductions, and thank you all for coming out tonight. We're really excited to kick off tonight's festivities with this conversation, and we only have about 50 more minutes, so we want to really get into hearing from our panelists tonight. So I'll go ahead and start with members of the team, Jillian and Rachel. We know that you guys were reconstructing, and it's been in development for quite some time. Can you tell us all a little bit about the company's process towards making this new project?
Start? Yeah. So I'll start just because so the piece began in 2018 in March, I think, of that year with 1 week. And kind of telescoping out the way that the team makes is we have friends in a lot of other collaborative ensembles and devising companies, and when they have visited our room, as sometimes happened, they're like, "Oh wow, you really are very democratic," it's the way we've described it as a consensus-driven writing process. And what that means for us is, first of all, we generate material often very, very quickly, and we generate in a whole bunch of different ways. A couple of the key ones are what we call writing on our feet, which is hopefully a more kind of productively described version of improvisation, just because improv sometimes can come with connotations of like humor, and actually for us the goal is the opposite of cleverness in a given moment. The goal is often really kind of slower, deeper character listening, and seeing what both language or just physical image, and now in this project song, might emerge from those places. And then the other ways that we write is sometimes like all sitting around a table at computers, or in various corners of a building, kind of taking private space for dreaming and writing, and then we come back and we share all those. And then it's sort of like a Ouija board of taste. And depending on who kind of keeps bringing up, oh, that monologue you wrote in Dartmouth, for example, Issa Davis, who is here with us, incredible writer, performer, scholar. There is language that she wrote about the house and the idea of a house in American drama. She uses the phrase American dream drama. And that you will hear in the play tonight. And that came from the time that we were here up in Dartmouth. And then very often research, and sometimes researching together and sometimes researching separately and bringing it back to the room, plays into the writing process.
I don't know if I have anything to add, really.
Workshop like the role of making drafts.
What I'll say about reconstructing itself and this process is that we ended up, as Rachel mentioned, generating can happen very quickly in a team room, and over the course of the last 9 years of this piece, about 600 pages? At least 600 pages of material that you will see distilled into 90-ish minutes tonight. So we should applaud for that. And that process of deciding what would be selected from that is a lot of what Rachel was talking about, of us meeting in various rooms over the last several years, and really the things that kept coming up, that people kept bringing up, are the things that made it into the piece. A lot of those things.
Thank you. What would you all say was the inspiration for this play, and how did your time and residence at Dartmouth contribute to really bringing that to life?
I'll start with what I know as the seed. I wasn't a part of the work yet at that point. I came in a little bit later. Which is an interesting thing about this piece, that people have entered at different points and left at different points, much like a university, where the ideas continue, but the people who carry those ideas changes. But the seed that I remember, and I want to know what you were going to say, but is that this piece came through people's bodies as a response to Charlottesville, which now feels like, I don't want to say a tiny event, but my God, the amount of things since then, right? But that being such a point for particularly the white artists at the time of the team, and feeling like there needed to be some kind of response to it. Yeah? Or do you want to, yeah.
No, I mean, that was definitely a part of it. The team, I mean, there's sort of two moments in particular like that I feel like the play got birthed, and the second one was actually your entrance in and what you brought with it, but which I'll talk about, but the first was actually back in 2000. We made it over a period from 2007 to 2009, was a show called Architecting. And that show was made starting to think about Gone with the Wind as a Confederate monument. And that was language that we had used then. And so when Charlottesville happened, it was like, oh, it's time to return to Confederate monuments. And I think importantly for us, when the team made architecting, at that time, it was an entire group of all white identifying artists. And so it also felt important to think about ourselves under the banner of what is a Confederate monument look like. And so this idea of sort of self-reflection, being a part of the piece in some way, was, I think, always baked in. The other huge formative moment was when Jillian came into the room, not to talk about you in the third person, but brought in the work of the scholar Hortense Spillers. And I could hand it back to you, or I can... We were talking at that point about, well, I'll just say we were talking about Confederate monuments. We had sort of thrown away Gone with the Wind very fast. It didn't feel quite worth our time. But then Jillian brought in Spillers and particularly played for us a lecture about intimacy. And it's a very, I would say, very academic, very kind of dry, very intimate presentation that Spillers gives of this paper that is discussing the relationship between Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson. And it's about 20 minutes, and then at the end, she sort of just leans into the mic very quietly and says, so without freedom, intimacy and love don't matter. Okay, bye. And thank you. Okay, thank you. And it was like a rocket went off in the room. And suddenly what really became the forefront of the piece is this question of intimacy and trying ultimately to have intimacy between us, between the group in sort of large kind of macro and micro levels. And then, as Jalen, the co-director of the piece, eventually put it, he was like, it used to be, is intimacy possible, was how he phrased the question, for real. And then when shit got really, really hard, he was like, I think now the question is, we know intimacy is possible, but is it optimal? And so it's a question that kind of kept turning over and over for us.
Thank you. It's really fascinating to see and hear how the research has impacted this process. And with that, I'd like to actually go to Deborah King, since you were one of the scholars on campus when they were in residence here. What did you think of the team members when you first met them, and what do you recollect about your conversations with them?
First, let me say that I'm so delighted you're back, and I'm so looking forward to this production. And I don't know that I contributed anything, because when Sam emailed me about meeting with the team, I was frightened a bit, intimidated. What do I have to say to people in theater? I never did any theater, anytime, anywhere, except to sit out in the seats and enjoy and to be provoked and to wonder. But Dartmouth is a liberal arts college, and so if we ask of our students to stretch, then it seemed important for me to also stretch. So I went to this meeting not knowing what really was going to take place, and was delighted, one, with meeting members of the team, but also learning, as you've heard just a bit about the process of doing the work. And then when they turned to me about the question of the North and slavery, and I guess I should preface this by saying the class that I taught, an advanced seminar, had just in the fall mounted an exhibit about Dartmouth and slavery. And so one of the things that intrigued me about the opportunity for the meeting was also thinking about public-facing presentations. Theater is one form of it. Our exhibit was another form, and I had to learn a whole different language for mounting that exhibit and curating it with my students. And so part of the conversation, I think, in the synergy was when we talked about there's slavery in the North. The founder of Dartmouth enslaved, at least last count, was 19 individuals over the course of his life. And then began talking about why, in many ways, it's so invisible in the North, and the things that we take for granted as part of the bucolic environment, whether it's the tall pine trees that Dartmouth celebrates, or the mills along the river. You know, we never stop and ask the question of, these are textile mills. They're weaving cotton fabric. Last time I checked, cotton doesn't grow up north. And began thinking about not only the direct, visible embodiment of slavery in terms of human bodies and the notion of owning, right, another person, but also, I think, particularly in the North, the invisibility of slavery and how we have to really sort of tease that out in many ways.
Can you tell us all a little bit more about the Dartmouth and Slavery Project that you have cultivated?
Believe it or not, although the course, I had been offering the course for a number of years, and many of you may be aware that there are university and slavery programs everywhere. I kept waiting for my colleagues in history, present company excluded, she was not here yet, to take on studying Dartmouth and slavery. I'm not a historian. Sometimes I play one, but anyway.
You are a sociologist, and we do love to historicize.
A sociologist with a strong historical bent, but it grew from the course. And then around the same time, the college archivist, recently retired Peter Carini, had begun looking through Eleazar Wheelock, the founder of Dartmouth's account books, and he was the one who began counting and finding all of these enslaved persons. And so the two of us, in fact, it was after the exhibit that was that fall, your visit to campus and our meeting, that we actually created the Dartmouth and Slavery Project. And we decided, okay, no one else is going to step up and do this, we're going to do it. And so, although we are both retired, we are continuing to work on it. There have been wonderful supports. Rauner Special Collections Library has been incredible, and they have housed the exhibit, which is digitized. They have housed the website for Dartmouth and Slavery. And our ongoing project, again, that challenged me in the same way that meeting with you all did, is we are engaged in another public-facing enterprise. We're writing a graphic novel about the family, one of the families that Wheelock enslaved. So it's about Exeter, Chloe, their children.
Amazing.
And so sometime this year, wow, it should be out. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
The check's in the mail.
Well, yes, this is really exciting to hear. And so, yes, this is the perfect opportunity to bring in our now on-campus expert on the colonial history of Northern New England. So can you tell us a little bit more about some of the issues that Dr. King was mentioning about why slavery has been a phenomenon we have so deeply attached to the South, and it's become a part of it's been a blind spot for us to acknowledge its histories and its legacies here in the Northeast.
Yeah, so discovering slavery in the North was kind of an origin story for me. I had never, as a student, heard about anything but slavery in the South and slavery. The North was where people would follow the drinking gourd to freedom, and maybe if you really were lucky, you could get to Canada, which was the land of freedom. And so I was surprised as an undergraduate to stumble upon this tombstone of a little girl, at that point she's been across the road from Harvard College for several hundred years, but I was there and I found her gravestone, and I was shocked because she was only a few years younger than I was at the time. And she was enslaved. And I was like, what is she doing here? I thought this is the land of freedom. And that question wouldn't go away. I didn't want to be a historian as a student at all. And I just couldn't let the story go. And so I followed this road to figure out why we have this narrative that the North is free and the South is slave, when all of the original 13 colonies held enslaved people, as well as what is now Canada. And as I followed the story, I realized that the story was about silence and purposeful silence. This wasn't an accident, right? The New England that we encounter, one that is often very racially segregated, was not just a preference, right? This was the result of centuries of crafting an environment and centuries of benefiting from the labor and the value of people's lives. So I hope that's answered the question of why is this interesting still?
Yeah, thank you. So now that we have some of that historical context, I'd love to come back to you all to talk about how you hoped or attempted to try to depict slavery, how it influenced the play, and what you hope for people to take away from it as well.
I can go. Listening to what you were speaking about, how Dartmouth and slavery really became named after we left, and I think in a similar way, I'm just wondering now what was in the air at that time that we were here. Because in a similar way, the way that enslavement and slavery in the piece started to shape itself, I would say. Not that we were shaping it, but starting to shape itself was through like the invisibility aspects, through the what isn't named parts. Through the shadow record, which is something that, thank you. I say that. My character, who's a professor, who is a little bit based on our time here with a certain lady. Not just you, but, but certainly inspired by you, your intellectual labor and effort toward naming the unnameable in the archive. The shadow record is something that continued to come up as one of those things that we kept speaking to each other in the room, in various rooms. That's how it emerges in the piece, is that this professor, Professor Lowe is her name, becomes obsessed, won't be left alone by just the mention of a name, the first name, Eugene, of an enslaved man, enslaved by William Byrd, who is an enslaver in Virginia. And his name is mentioned several times through this diary that Professor Lowe is reading with her white collaborator. And it's that name and it's this person that draws her forward to try to figure out what is that record that isn't being spoken. And then takes her into this. Do we know is it imagination or is it something else? Come and see. No. But yeah.
Yeah, I can add on a word that you used at one point in the process and others have used about our work is palimpsest. And I often talk about the piece also through the lens of like an onion skin. And I would say in terms of enslavement being a part of the work, there's it sort of does go back to intimacy, and one of the earliest images that you'll hear in the piece is like, as a definition for intimacy, of if Jillian and I are sitting at the same table as we are technically right now, are we at the same table? And what do we need to know each other knows? As well as what do we need to know about ourselves to like actually be sharing space, really sharing space, versus like masses occupying the same force field. And I think this idea of like the onion skin and enslavement as part of that becomes it's just it's there. It's part of the chair and the table and our bodies. And certainly like the question of the white collaborators in the piece again and again became one of the kind of key assignments that was given to us, because we often work through giving each other creative prompts. Danae Benton, one of our collaborators, gave us the prompt, gave the white folks in the room the prompt: trace white supremacy through 3 generations of your family, including your own. And that those 3 generations would not bring us back to the period of enslavement. And yet, as you were bringing up, like, who worked at a mill that was, dealing with textiles and cotton coming from where, who, my great grandmother, I won't take our time with stories about her, but it all just does come up. And so the piece is ultimately very much structured as a palimpsest, essentially.
Wow, thank you. Oh, do you want to add more? Okay, well, I actually have a question that I'd like to pose to the entire panel. And there's just been this theme about reclaiming narratives that have been made invisible for various reasons. And so I'm curious to hear your guys' general thoughts about the importance and the significance of storytelling, of analyzing narratives, of utilizing different modalities and platforms to generate imagination in this socio-political moment, whether that's through our students. So I know you teach the race and archival silences class, whether that's through literally creating historical artifacts that did not exist, or again, creating plays that might leave people with questions to go do additional research. But I'd just like to hear you all talk a little bit more about the power of imagination and the power of stories in this moment.
Right this term, I'm actually teaching 2 courses that touch on how we tell the story and the ethics behind telling the story, because some silences are purposeful and they are violent, and other silences are choices. And so getting the students to just think through how and who tells the story is something that's been really interesting, and it's been incredibly amazing to have these tools available. The students I've got some of my students here today to call you out, but, that they use this Dartmouth and Slavery Project resources, and just seeing Dartmouth itself as this place that they feel like they know come alive in a very different way is really inspiring. And seeing how students come with questions that have this sense of peeling back the onion. Oh, I started with this initial thought, and now I want to ask a different question. Am I allowed to ask this question? And giving them the space and the language to engage with people like Spillers, right? People like Saidiya Hartman. So many incredible thinkers and scholars has really been a gift, I think, about being here.
I'll just add, in terms of storytelling, and I love this question, thank you. I just my personal experience is often I think I know what I'm thinking, just feel very confident about that all the time. And then I start to have to say what I'm thinking, and I'm like, I don't have any idea what I'm thinking. And I think fundamentally it's actually through the process of articulation in that can be in a sort of very literal explainy form, or in a much more poetic form that is trying to get the sense and the truth of it, that I have begun to like actually get some sense of power or distance over a past thing and learn to live with it. And so I think very much actually for this process, there has been something very empowering. Back to Danae's extraordinary like assignment, there was something incredibly useful about like, oh, my grandmother and this portrait. There is a portrait that I don't tell the story of, but that is on the set that you will see tonight. That is my family's portrait. And it was through the articulation of the story of that portrait that I was like, oh, it's right here. And I get to both have my grandfather, who is the little boy in that portrait, and like all of the connotations of that portrait with this little Jewish boy being dressed as a Puritan in that picture. And it has made it actually both so much more meaningful and also so much lighter for me.
I think I want to say that I don't often think about my work in storytelling. Matter of fact, I never do. So I'm actually processing this question in the moment. And what immediately came to mind in thinking particularly about the Dartmouth and Slavery Project was our early commitment to trying to reveal and uncover various stories, but also doing so with an awareness of the alleged founding mission of Dartmouth, which was to educate the indigenous people of their land. And we have at every point in the process really dug into that story. So those are stories I did not know. It was never taught in school. And although I've been here at Dartmouth and have enjoyed the powwows and gone to discussions and all that, going back into the colonial period and following forward really radically helped me rethink what I thought I knew about enslavement of people of African descent in the Americas. Not only was it sort of the silence up north and it not existing here, but also for me, learning that Massachusetts, for example, passes its law legalizing slavery, not for Africans, but it was after the Pequot War. And they took captives and sent them on ships to the Caribbean to be sold. When we began, so one for me has been always this incredible learning. So I still now, in retirement, love webinars. That's what my calendar's full of. And I'm continually to read and read because it helps me rethink the stories that I want to share with others, but also the stories that as a woman of African descent in the United States that I tell about myself and about my family.
I would love to hear from you too about the practice of cultivating imagination through your work and through your craft. Yeah, I just asked her, it's the same question, but I just asked her to reflect on the practice of cultivating imagination through her craft.
Yeah, it's for me, the praxis of cultivating imagination is the way that I take the theory or the critical thinking and form it into something that we can all be in conversation about together. It's the way that I bring it. Imagination is the mutation of the idea, and sometimes it comes forward, like you're saying, exactly like I think it will, because I think this way here. But then when it filters through all of this whole archive, it can come out as something else, and it's shared with these other archives, these other bodies, that then creates a third thing in the middle. And I guess that's what I would say about the importance of imagination. None of us would be here if someone hadn't imagined us here. And that power rests with all of us to always be moving together into what's next, what else can be, what else can be, what else can be. And also reflecting on, was that what was? Like, imagination works in both directions. What else can be? Was that what was? What else can be? And the dance between those things is my praxis.
Thank you. Well, we only have a couple more minutes, but we did want to see if there were any pressing questions from the audience for our panelists.
I'll just bring a mic to someone if there is.
Oh, right here.
I'm not a Dartmouth person, so I don't know.
Well, we want the mic also for our recording.
But I'm curious, given what you shared historically and your presence here, if the history department is now just using you as representation and the center focal point, or if they've embraced it in a different way, and how maybe the bringing back of this show might also challenge that.
I think that was right.
I thought I took the other one.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's I definitely, when reflecting on the conversations that I've had and the relationships I've had, I feel energized by the questions that are not only being posed to me by my students, but by colleagues and by people that I've met as I've gotten here, and especially in a time where, I'm going to say it, I think a lot of people feel a bit of a fear to talk about these kinds of topics. And I think the speaking through that anyway, there's a genuineness to that that I feel. And so I feel a lot of hope and a space to imagine what's possible, and I do get a lot of that energy from the students, but also from the people in history who are also involved in asking these questions, and the people in the community. I've met incredible people in the community who are, despite how people might feel personally and what the stakes are of asking these kind of questions, are still doing the work and digging deep and asking.
Other questions? I'll give it back to you, Dr. Shea.
Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions from the audience, I'll wrap up with one final question to the panelists. And that is just to reflect on the word reconstructing. That is a very loaded word in our country's history. We can think about Reconstruction as a historical time period where lots of social changes were happening in the political climate. We can think about it as a process, as you all articulated it, reconstructing, connecting that past to the present. So I just want to close by giving you all an opportunity to reflect on it from your perspectives as scholars, and also the intentionality behind naming the playlist.
Great question.
Thank you.
I love when we take a noun and add ing to it, because it gives, it moves us from being static. It refers to a dynamism. It's not just a process of, quote unquote, constructing a thing that gets finished, but that it is always ongoing, repeating itself, continuing. And I think certainly for me in this moment, the reconstructing that we as an institution, as a community, as a nation, as a world, that we have an incredible, incredible calling and mission to be involved in reconstructing.
That was a really good question. And I have to say that that word really struck a personal tone for me, because a lot of times when we think about how far we're away from these moments, it's not that far. I only recently discovered that my great-great-grandfather, who died in 1979, was born just a few years after the end of slavery. He actually did live to be 110 years old. And thinking about the time frame between his life, growing up during Reconstruction as a young man, and then living until I was on Earth, is incredible, but it also shows us how close this is. And so when I saw the play, no matter what, I was going, because I wanted to know what this means. What are we reconstructing? Hopefully something better.
I'm going to say something that I haven't said or thought about yet with the name Reconstructing. And that's a question for all of us, which is, what if Reconstruction never ended? What if it never ended? I think I'll just leave it there.
And so many beautiful things that have been said. I'll just say the play used to be called Reconstruction, and then I think it was you, but yeah, suggested it should become the verb, become dynamic, and it was clear. I don't know. The team has often made the mistake mid-process of feeling like we know where the continuum ends, and then we hit about halfway through the process for making a show, and it's like, oh shit, it's much farther than we thought, and which is always a good thing. And that was a moment where it's like, oh, it actually crystallized for us. And Deborah, you just gave like such beautiful voice to what is really like. The director, Robert Woodruff, uses, he talks about the idea of the infinite gesture, of like, what is the gesture that continues past the piece? And I won't ruin the end, but I would say like this question of a sort of hopeful, but also like helpless dynamism. It's a real part of the quandary in the show. I think we killed the subtitle.
We don't have the subtitle now?
I don't think it.
No, the working.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's there.
What was it?
The subtitle. What I tried to make a new subtitle for the show because there was an old subtitle for the show. I don't think it did not get voted in, actually. And I think that's it. But that is an important distinction, because you know how I talked about how the team has a consensus-driven writing process. The way that takes shape is people upvote shit. And they do that through bringing it up the next time we start again. They bring it up, they're like, oh, that monologue has to be in there, whatever. And people did not upvote it. It just was email silence. So just yeah. That's how subtitles die. But the subtitle that I had been proposing, which I still stand behind, is a work in progress. And then progress would be crossed out, and it just says process. And and you will see this idea of a collective of artists, the team, trying to make a work about. That is the outermost onion skin or the innermost onion skin of the show. So it is both. Yes, so this idea of reconstructing definitely has many forms, including very much for us, initially relating to a lot of research about the Reconstruction period.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this rich conversation. I hope that it has really set the tone for you all to take, an audacity to imagine, to peel back the layers of the onion, and to get active in this process of reconstructing. So please help me thank our panelists for this lovely conversation.